All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at the work of Jawdat Said, a fascinating Islamic thinker who has a really powerful argument about nonviolent social change. His idea is this: humanity is suffering from a disease we refuse to even diagnose. But here's the kicker. He says the cure has been available to us for millennia.
So Said kicks things off by painting this picture of our world. And it's not about a bunch of separate conflicts. This war here, that political issue there. No, he sees it as one huge shared crisis. Think about it. A vast majority of us are living in frustration, while the powerful minority, well, they're living in fear of losing that power. This tension, he says, is the main symptom of our collective illness. And this really gets to the heart of his argument. It's a powerful metaphor. Look, we pour billions of dollars into defenses against biological germs, right? We're terrified of germ warfare. But what about what he calls intellectual viruses? You know, the ideas that lead to hatred, to violence, to bloodshed. We just kind of let them spread. We allow them to pollute our cultures with almost no defense. It's like we're meticulously treating the body, but we've left the mind completely exposed.
Okay, so here's the roadmap for how we're going to break this down. First, we're going to diagnose the disease of violence itself. Then, we'll uncover the prophetic message that reveals its root cause. From there, we'll find the cure in the ancient story of Abel. And finally, we'll explore what this all means for us, right here, in our modern age of knowledge.
So let's start with a really fundamental problem. It's not just that violence exists. The real issue, the deep issue, is that we are collectively convinced that it works, that it's an effective tool for achieving our goals. That's the grand misconception. Let's put it this way. For most of human history, it was just an obvious, observable fact that the sun moved around the earth. I mean, you could see it happen every day. And people were willing to kill and die to defend that idea. It took a figure like Galileo to come along and challenge that huge, shared misconception. Said argues that our belief in the power of violence is a similar, deeply rooted error that we have yet to correct. So if our belief in violence is the disease, then what's the diagnosis? Where does it all come from? Well, Said suggests the root cause is a profound misunderstanding of the single unified message delivered by all the prophets throughout history.
The Quran shows us this striking pattern. Time after time, a prophet is sent with a very specific message. So you look at Noah's call to his people, to worship God and God alone.
Then you see Hud, sent to a different people at a different time, and he's delivering the exact same core message. The words are practically identical.
And here we go again with Saleh. The point is driven home through this repetition. You've got different names, different places, different eras, but the fundamental call was one and the same. So the question is, what does it actually mean?
This is where Said says we've missed the point. This repeated call isn't just a theological statement. It's actually a radical socio-political demand. He calls it the word of equity, a demand to end the very structure of human beings dominating other human beings.
And when you break it down, the practical steps become pretty clear. Worship none but God means refusing to elevate any human, a king, a state, a political system, to the level of ultimate authority. And that third step really makes it explicit. Take not each other as deities. That is a direct challenge to all forms of tyranny.
The Quranic term for this system of domination is Taghut. And rejecting Taghut, rejecting tyranny, rejecting that temptation to dominate others by force is presented as the essential step towards achieving what's called rushd, which is basically moral and intellectual maturity. You can't be a truly mature society if you still believe in solving problems through force.
Okay, so if the disease is our belief in violence and the diagnosis is our failure to heed this call for equity, where in the world do we find the cure? Said points us to one of the oldest stories in human history. First, though, a really key concept. Said argues that the seal of prophecy with the Prophet Muhammad marked a huge pivot point for humanity. The way we access truth shifted. It moved from an era of supernatural revelation to an era of knowledge, an age where we have to use our reason, our observations, and our history. What this means is that the cure isn't going to be a miracle. It's a method we can learn and apply ourselves.
So let's go way back to the beginning, to the story of Adam's sons. Cain feels wronged, his ego is bruised, and so he turns to his brother with the oldest threat in the world, the one we still hear every day: I will kill you. This is the default response of the ego when it feels slighted.
And right here, this is the cure. Abel's response is revolutionary. He completely refuses to participate in the cycle of violence. He He unilaterally withdraws. He doesn't say, let's fight. He says, I will not raise my hand against you. This isn't passivity. It's a profound strategic choice.
You see, by refusing to fight back, Abel changes the entire equation. If he fought and lost, his death would be a victory for Cain. But by refusing to participate, he transforms his own death from a combat loss into a grisly crime. He completely removes the so-called benefit of killing, leaving Cain with nothing but shame and regret. He cancels the whole logic of violence.
So let's bring this ancient cure into our world. How does the method of Abel apply to us, here in the age of knowledge? What's the modern prognosis?
Now, Said is very clear that this doesn't mean a just society can't defend itself, but the conditions are incredibly strict. Force is never permitted to found a society or to impose ideas. It can only be used as an absolute last resort to stop aggression against an already existing just society. The key is, you cannot create legitimacy through illegitimate means.
So what does modern Taghut look like? Said points directly to the UN veto right. He sees it as the institutionalization of inequality, the very opposite of that word of equity. It's a system that formally declares that some nations are deities and others are not, creating a global hierarchy based on power, not on justice.
Which brings us right back to where we started. The cure for our global disease is a form of intellectual hygiene. Just like Louis Pasteur discovered the physical germs that cause disease, we now have to identify and disinfect our cultures from the toxic ideas, the intellectual viruses, that inevitably lead to bloodshed.
And that leaves us with this final, challenging question from Said. It's not enough to know there's a problem. Will we develop the science to identify these intellectual diseases? And more importantly, will we find the collective will to spread that knowledge? To basically inoculate our societies against the virus of violence, once and for all. That's the challenge he leaves for all of us.